Husband walks out on wife right after their twin babies are born, shocked by one child's unusual appearance. Scott was a methodical, quiet, and reserved man. He was raised in a strict family where everything had to be in order, and appearance was as important as character. Anything that strayed from the standard was treated with suspicion, almost as a threat. From a young age, he learned to hide his emotions, avoid conflicts, and follow rules without questioning them. This shaped his adult life, organized, stable, and predictable. He worked as a maintenance technician, where he was known for being discreet, responsible, and precise. He was never ambitious, but he took everything he did seriously. He was respected for his integrity and consistency. Routine was his safe place. He didn't seek strong emotions or sudden changes. When he met Sarah, something inside him shifted. She was sweet, generous, and patient. She had a welcoming look and a smile that always seemed sincere. Coming from a simple and affectionate family, she had a lightness in the way she dealt with life, something that contrasted with the rigidity he carried. Where he offered order, she brought emotion. And it was this difference that brought them together. They dated for 2 years before getting married. Despite their differences in temperament and background, they built a balanced relationship. She filled the emotional void in him, and he provided her with the stability she had never had. Together, they complemented each other. The dream of starting a family took time to come true. For 3 years, they tried to get pregnant, facing tests, uncertain diagnoses, failed attempts, and sleepless nights. The tension between them grew, but love endured. When Sarah finally got pregnant, the relief was immediate. It felt like the weight they had been carrying had disappeared. The arguments stopped, and the days became lighter. And when they found out they were expecting twins, the joy doubled. Every ultrasound, every kick, every detail of the pregnancy was lived with anxiety and happiness. They began to prepare with dedication and hope. They were ready, or at least they believed they were. The afternoon started warm. Sarah walked slowly around the house, feeling the swelling from the last few weeks weighing on her body. Scott had come home early that day, as he had been doing in the last few weeks, paying attention to any sign that the twins might want to make their appearance. They had everything ready, the bag packed, documents sorted, cribs set up, but nothing really prepared them for the moment when reality truly hit. Around 4 in the afternoon, Sarah felt a sharp pain, different from the others. She stopped in the middle of the room, holding her belly with both hands. The pain repeated itself stronger, and fluid ran down her legs. Time stopped for a moment, then came the scream. "Scott! I think it's happening!" she said, her eyes wide and her breathing short. Scott ran to her, holding her by the arms. "Are you sure? Is it starting?" "Yes, it hurts so much. Please, let's go." He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the keys, helped Sarah into the car, and the whole time he kept telling her to stay calm, even though he himself was tense, driving in silence, his hands firm on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. The contractions were close, and before they knew it, Sarah was taken to the delivery room. Scott waited outside for a few minutes while the doctors prepared. The nurse informed him that the birth would be natural but quick because the babies were well positioned. His stomach churned, his heart raced. It was anxiety mixed with fear, with joy, with everything that a moment like this carries. Shortly after, he was called to enter. He put on a white gown, a cap, and sanitized his hands. When he entered the room, he saw Sarah lying down, sweating, exhausted, but conscious. She smiled when she saw him, holding his hand tightly. "They're coming, love," she said between breaths. "I know. Everything will be okay." The first cry came minutes later. A boy. The doctor carefully lifted him, wrapped him in a cloth, and handed him to the nurse. He was small, but strong, and his cry filled the room. Scott approached, looked at his son's face, and was overwhelmed with emotion. A silent pride filled his chest. He looked at Sarah and smiled. "It's our boy," he said, almost whispering. Sarah cried silently. She was tired but relieved. Shortly after, the second child arrived. The girl was born with the same strength, but when she was placed in the nurse's arms, a strange silence filled the room. Scott approached, expecting to feel the same way he did with the boy. But as soon as he saw his daughter's face, something inside him froze. She was healthy, yes, and crying loudly, but her skin was very dark. Dark in a way that didn't match anything he could understand or accept. He looked at Sarah, then at the daughter, then at the doctors. His mind began to race. He tried to piece things together, but nothing made sense. The contrast between the two babies was glaring. The girl, though a newborn, had skin so dark that there was no room for doubt in his mind, tainted by the rigidity of his upbringing. Is this right?" he murmured, almost soundlessly. No one answered. Sarah, still panting, noticed that something was wrong. She looked at her husband and saw in his eyes an emptiness that hadn't been there before. The happiness was gone. The look that had been full of expectation now was hard, distant, as if he were looking at something that hurt him. "Scott, what's wrong?" she asked, trying to sit up. He didn't answer. He stood there, frozen, looking at the daughter as if he were seeing a stranger. His hands, which had held the boy firmly, were now still by his side. She's your daughter too. Why are you like this?" Sarah said, already sensing the discomfort in the air. "Her skin," he murmured, his voice trembling. Sarah's eyes widened. "What? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense." Sarah swallowed hard. She was too tired to fully understand, but his tone was cold, filled with something she had never heard in his voice before. "Are you saying you think she's not your daughter?" Scott turned his gaze, crossed his arms, and slowly walked away from the bed. "Tell me, is there something you need to tell me?" "What? Are you accusing me of something, Scott?" Her voice rose, but it was more out of fear than anger. "Look at her. Look closely. This isn't possible. It doesn't make sense." Sarah stayed silent. Not because she agreed, but because she didn't know what to say. She didn't understand either. She looked at her daughter, then at her son, and felt her chest tighten. She never imagined that such a physical difference could trigger such a violent reaction. "Scott, I never betrayed you. Never. This girl is your daughter." "No, Sarah, she's not. You can swear all you want, but I'm not stupid. Her color, it's obvious. This doesn't come from me." I don't know how to explain, but that doesn't mean she's not yours. The lack of explanation is enough for me," he said coldly, turning his gaze away from her. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah, still recovering, felt such a deep emptiness that she could barely breathe. The man she loved, with whom she had built a life, now looked at her as if she were a stranger. The next morning, already in the room, Scott barely spoke. He hardly touched the daughter. Sarah watched every move. The distance was clear, and when they were finally alone, he went straight to the point. "I'm leaving." "What? You're leaving me here?" "I can't stay. Not after this." "Scott, please. I don't know what happened, but I know what I lived with you. I know how much we wanted these children. Don't destroy that like this." "You didn't give me a choice. This is a betrayal I can't swallow." "You're wrong. You're blind. I never betrayed you," she screamed, desperate. "Goodbye, Sarah." Scott left the hospital without looking back. The hallway seemed longer than it actually was, and every step dragged the weight of the disappointment he believed he was carrying. He didn't wait for the discharge papers, didn't inform anyone. He took a taxi outside the emergency room and went straight to his parents' house. where he knew he would find refuge. During the ride, he didn't say a word to the driver. His eyes stared out at the fogged glass, but he didn't see anything. His head was boiling, his throat dry, his heart hardened by the feeling of betrayal. When he arrived, his mother, Olivia, was the one who opened the door. She was wearing an apron, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. Upon seeing her son with that hard expression and red eyes, she understood something had happened. "My son, what happened? Is something wrong with Sarah, with the babies?" she asked, stepping back 2 steps to let him enter. "Something happened, Mom. Everything I feared happened without me knowing." "What do you mean? Talk to me." Scott entered without answering immediately. He dropped his bag in the corner of the living room and sat down on the couch as if his body couldn't stand anymore. Olivia sat next to him, tense, waiting for the words he struggled to form. "She betrayed me," he finally said, his voice firm but low. "What?" "Both of them. Neither of them is mine. It's impossible. The girl was born with skin so dark, and if she's not my daughter, then the boy can't be either. I looked, Mom, and I understood. She deceived me." Olivia stayed silent for a few seconds, then slowly shook her head. "I knew it. I always knew that sweetness of hers was hiding something. I always thought she was too good to be true. Now the truth is here." "I wish I was wrong," he murmured, lowering his head. "No, son, you did the right thing in leaving. You have to keep your dignity. If she betrayed you, she doesn't deserve your trust." "But the kids?" "She destroyed that, Scott. You're not to blame. She's the one who lied." Scott squeezed his eyes shut, as if trying to erase the image. He didn't respond. His mother's voice reinforced what he wanted to believe, but something inside him still churned. Minutes later, Scott's father, Michael, came home from the market with 2 bags in his hands. When he saw his son there, he dropped everything on the counter and went to him. "Scott, you here? What happened? Is Sarah and the babies okay?" Scott took time to answer. Olivia spoke first. "The twins were born, but our son found out he was betrayed. The kids aren't his." Michael looked at his son, confused. "What do you mean? How can you be so sure?" "Dad, the girl was born with dark skin, really dark, and if she's not mine, then the boy can't be either. It doesn't make sense. They're someone else's kids." "Did you talk to Sarah about this?" "Yes. She denied it. Said she doesn't know, that she's surprised too, but that just makes it worse." "And are you sure neither of them could be yours?" "Absolutely. It makes no sense, no chance. I looked at them and I saw they're not my kids." Michael took a deep breath, pulled out a chair, and sat facing his son. "You're accusing Sarah based just on this?" "Dad, it's not just that. It's instinct. It's what my eyes saw. It's what my heart feels." "And what if you're wrong? What if you're making a mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your life?" "I'm not. There's no explanation, Dad, none. You loved Sarah. You wanted this family. Are you willing to throw it all away for this certainty?" "Yes, because it's no longer just a certainty. It's a fact. She had kids with another man." "Sometimes what we see isn't what is, and what seems impossible might have an explanation." "Not this time. Not for this." Michael stood up, took a step toward his son, and placed his hand on his shoulder. "I'm just asking you to think, to breathe a little. You're hurt and too hurt to make decisions right now." "I've already decided." Olivia crossed her arms firm. "You did the right thing. A woman who lies about her children lies about everything." Scott didn't answer. He also stood up, looked at both of them, tired, divided. He grabbed his bag and went upstairs to the room where he used to sleep as a child. He needed silence. He needed distance. But above all, he needed to stay firm in the conviction that protected him from chaos, the one that said he had been completely betrayed. At Sarah's house, time seemed to pass differently. The days stretched out as if the clock refused to move forward, and the nights came with a silence louder than any argument. The twins' cries broke the night, but what hurt Sarah the most wasn't the physical exhaustion or her heavy eyes. It was the absence of Scott. The space next to the bed, once occupied by her partner, was now just a cold emptiness, reminding her every minute that something had broken, and perhaps forever. She spent hours holding the babies, one in each arm, trying to manage everything without falling apart. The girl, with her dark skin and lively eyes, slept peacefully, unaware of the judgment she had already faced the moment she was born. The boy, more restless, seemed to feel the tension in the house. Karen, Sarah's mother, was always nearby. She arrived early, left late, and when she wasn't preparing food or washing clothes, she was next to her daughter, holding her hand, or just sitting in silence with her. "You don't have to say anything, my daughter," Karen said, gently stroking Sarah's hair. "Just breathe, just live another day." Sarah didn't cry often, but sometimes, when the exhaustion surpassed the soul's limit, the tears came without warning. She didn't scream, didn't rage. She just cried softly, her face hidden between her hair and hands. "I don't understand, Mom. I swear on everything sacred. I would never do this to him," she said one of those nights. Karen sat beside her and held her face. "And I believe you. I believe with all my heart. I don't need to understand why, Sarah. Just looking into your eyes is enough." Sarah smiled, but it was a sad smile. "He doesn't believe me. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was dirty. Because he's blind from pain, from pride, and maybe from what they taught him. But he won't sleep in peace while this doubt lives with him. You know that, right?" Sarah nodded, her eyes lowered. "Then offer proof, daughter. Show him you're not afraid of the truth. Do a test. Tell him, let's do a DNA test. It's not because you owe him explanations. It's because he needs to hear the truth in a way that his pride will accept. I don't know if I can, not because I doubt, but because it still hurts just to hear his voice. You don't have to do this for him. Do it for you, for your kids. One day, they'll grow up and want to know why their father left." Sarah stayed silent for a moment, watching the daughter sleep in the makeshift crib next to the couch. The next day, after much thinking, she decided to call. She picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed Scott's number. He answered after a few rings, his voice dry, not even saying hello. "Hi, Scott," she said, her voice calm but heavy with pain. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I want to ask you one thing, just one." "There's nothing left to talk about. Everything has been said. You believe you're not the father of the children. I can't convince you otherwise with words, but if you accept, we can do a test, a DNA test, to prove you're wrong." On the other side of the line, silence came first, then a dry laugh. "You want to prove to me that black is white. No test will change what I saw. It's not about what you saw. It's about what you believe, even without certainty. The color of that girl is proof of what you did. You betrayed me, Sarah. No test will erase that. Scott, I loved you. I still love you. And I know you well enough to know that one day this doubt will eat you up. I'm just giving you the chance to not carry this forever. To me, it's already definitive. And you should accept it too," he said before hanging up without waiting for a response. Sarah stood still for a few seconds, looking at the phone screen. The call had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it seemed to drain all her energy. Karen entered the room shortly after and saw her daughter's face. He didn't want to. Sarah just shook her head negatively. "He said he already has his certainty, that the color of our daughter's skin is all he needs." Karen pressed her lips together, trying to contain the growing anger in her chest. "A man who doesn't have the courage to seek the truth, daughter, is a lost man." "I know. But even so, I still hope he comes to his senses. The days passed slowly. Sarah divided her time between pain, caring for the babies, and trying to keep her head up. She wasn't the type of woman to easily give in to sadness, but there was something that silently drained her strength. Sometimes, when she looked at her daughter, a subtle fear would arise, the fear that she would grow up feeling that her father rejected her because of the color of her skin, and that hurt more than any abandonment. At Scott's parents' house, silence was also starting to weigh heavily. He avoided talking, locked himself in his room for hours, and even when he came downstairs to eat, he remained silent. Olivia thought he just needed time. She lied, my son. Time will heal this. Someone will come along who truly deserves you. But Michael didn't see it that way. His son's gaze was increasingly lost, and rigidity was beginning to give way to doubt. One night, Michael entered his son's room without knocking. Scott was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "May I?" his father asked, already pulling out a chair. "Come in." Michael sat in silence for a few seconds, then spoke quietly. "Do you dream of her?" "Sometimes." Who else?" Scott took a moment to answer. "Her, the girl." "And what do you see?" "She looks at me, as if she's waiting for something. But I can't move. I stay still, and I wake up with a tightness in my chest. That's regret, son. It's doubt. And what if I'm wrong? What if—" Michael didn't answer. He just watched his son struggle with his own voice. "I have a friend, Stephen, a doctor, genetic specialist. You should talk to him. Just listen. It won't hurt." Scott closed his eyes as if resisting, but the doubt had already taken root. 2 nights later, without warning, he went to Stephen's office. He was an older man, calm in speech, with attentive eyes. He listened to everything without interrupting. Scott told him what he had seen, what he thought, what he felt, and finally he asked, "Is it possible for a child to be born with traits so different from the parents, even without betrayal?" Stephen leaned back in his chair. "It's rare, but yes, it's possible. Recessive inheritance, distant genetic traits, lineages that skip generations. I've seen cases where a child is born with characteristics that no one in the immediate family has. But genes, they tell old stories. But the difference, it's huge. What you saw was a sign, but signs don't tell the whole story. Only a test can do that." Scott sat in silence, looking at his hands. "Do you think I made a mistake? I think you acted based on what you believed to be the truth, but sometimes the truth isn't what it seems, it's what is confirmed." Scott stood up slowly, his shoulders heavy, his mind in conflict. That night, he couldn't sleep. Stephen's words echoed along with the cry he still remembered. That baby's cry he heard in the hospital, the same one he chose to ignore. And for the first time since leaving the hospital, Scott asked himself, what if she didn't lie? The doubt was no longer just an annoying whisper in Scott's head. After that sleepless night, it had become a constant presence. He woke up with his daughter's face in his thoughts, remembering her cry when she was born, the way he looked at her without truly seeing her. The weight of the possibility that he had been wrong began to suffocate him more than any certainty he had ever held. He walked around the house in silence, avoided his mother, barely answered his father, and it was Michael who calmly encouraged him one last time. "There's still time to do the right thing," he said, looking at him from across the table. Scott didn't answer immediately, but something in his father's tone hit him differently. The next morning he picked up the phone, stared at Sarah's number for long seconds, and finally dialed. She answered with a quiet voice, a bit surprised. "Hello?" "Sarah, it's me." There was a brief, tense silence on the other end. She didn't hang up, she just waited. "I thought it over, about everything, about what happened. I want to say that I accept to do the test. Sarah took a deep breath. Her voice came calm, firm, but with a trace of relief she didn't try to hide. "Okay, I'll schedule it. Thank you for accepting. I'm not doing this to prove I'm wrong. I just don't want to carry this doubt without being sure." "I know." 2 weeks later, they sat side by side in silence at a small clinic, filling out forms. The tension between them was thick. Sarah held the daughter in her arms, while the nurse weighed the boy and prepared the materials for the collection. Scott kept his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding looking at either of the two babies for too long. Neither of the adults spoke during the procedure. First, they collected samples from the children. Then Scott's blood. Everything was carefully packed, sealed, labeled. When it was over, Sarah adjusted both children in her arms, and he simply stood up slowly. They left the clinic in silence, going in opposite directions without saying goodbye. The days that followed were the longest of Scott's life. Each hour felt like a punishment. He kept replaying the scene of the birth mentally, reliving the moment he saw his daughter for the first time and rejected her. He remembered Sarah's lost gaze, the way he left the room, the harsh words he used. He remembered Olivia feeding the hurt. He remembered Michael's calmness, who never confronted him but only planted doubt. When the test results came in, he received the call from the clinic. He picked up the envelope personally, sat on the bench in the square in front with sweaty palms and a racing heart. He opened it carefully, as if the paper could bite. He read it once, then again, and one more time. Both were his children. There was no margin for error, no chance of mistake, no doubt. The dark-skinned girl was his biological daughter, the boy too, both his. The world around him seemed to disappear. The sounds of people walking, the cars, the wind, all became distant. He felt his face heat up, his throat tighten, and for the first time, he allowed himself to break down. He cried. He cried like he had never cried before. From shame, from guilt, from regret. He cried for the daughter he didn't hold. He cried for Sarah, who didn't believe but loved him until the end. He cried for being weak, for letting the rigidity of his upbringing guide his reaction. He cried for himself, for losing days that wouldn't return, for denying what he wanted most. He spent hours wandering the city aimlessly. When he got home, Michael opened the door and knew. He didn't need to ask. It was true, wasn't it? Scott just nodded, his eyes red and downcast. "So you know what you have to do now." He nodded again, too weak to speak. Went upstairs, took a shower, put on a clean shirt. He separated the test papers and left again. He arrived at Sarah's house in the late afternoon. He was nervous, his heart pounding, as if it wanted to escape. He knocked carefully on the door, in no hurry. Karen answered. Her eyes narrowed when she saw him, but she didn't say anything. She just stepped back, giving space. Sarah appeared in the living room doorway, holding the daughter in her arms. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes filled with something that wasn't anger. It was pain. But there was also a question. "I wanted to talk to you," he said, almost whispering. She gestured with her head and went inside, sitting slowly on the sofa. He remained standing for a few seconds, then knelt in front of her, the test in his hands. "I was wrong, very wrong. I've read this here more than 10 times, as if there were a way to change what happened. But the truth doesn't change. We just change when we face it." Sarah didn't speak. She just held her daughter more firmly. "They're mine, and I rejected both of them, rejected you. And now, there's nothing I can say that will erase that. But still, I'm here. I came to ask for forgiveness." She looked at him in silence. Her eyes were misty, but there was no hatred there. There was sadness, yes, but there was also love. "You broke something inside me, Scott. Not just with words, but with absence. I had to be strong when all I wanted was not to be, and still I think of you every day. I was weak. I let myself be carried away by a prejudice that wasn't even mine. It was something I carried and never questioned. I just accepted it and let this destroy us. You hurt our daughter. She doesn't know yet, but one day she will feel this. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to show her that it should never have happened. Scott began to cry again. The tears came heavily, honestly. Karen watched from the kitchen silently. Sarah lowered her eyes, took a deep breath. Do you want to come back? I want to rebuild, from wherever you want, at whatever pace you can, even if it takes years. But I want to be a father. I want to be a husband. I want to be the man you saw when you chose to love me. She wiped her own tears with the back of her hand. Then start slowly. Start by being here. That night, he stayed. He didn't sleep in the bed but on the sofa. He woke several times to help with the babies. He held the girl in his arms for the first time gently, as if asking permission. She looked at him without understanding, but without fear, and smiled, a small, innocent smile. Scott broke down again. The days that followed were of rebuilding. He came back slowly, without haste, with humility. He helped with diaper changes, sang songs he didn't know he remembered. Sarah watched, testing the limits of forgiveness inside herself. But she never used the pain as a weapon, never threw it back at his mistake. She forgave not because she forgot, but because she chose to move forward. With time, the daughter grew attached to Scott as if she knew that something had been healed there. The boy became a little adventurer, following his father around the house, pulling his hand, wanting attention. Sarah, between one hold and another, saw the family she almost lost bloom again. The pain of the past didn't disappear, but it was transformed. The house, once full of silence, now had laughter, conversations, hasty steps. And in Scott's eyes, there was something else: truth. The family that almost was destroyed by an unfounded idea was rebuilt on something stronger than blood: the courage to recognize mistakes, the strength to ask for forgiveness, and the love of those who choose to stay, even after everything. In the end, it wasn't the DNA test that proved paternity. It was the regret, it was love, and it was the forgiveness that saved what could still be saved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.